origins of the horse are kind of a mystery. The prevailing theory was that modern, non-wild horses arose very recently from an ancestral population that lived in Kazakhstan, some 5,500 years ago, where they were first domesticated. However, a new study published in the journal Science casts doubt on this idea and pushes the origin of horses back into the shadows of mystery. More than that, the study found something surprising about the last population of so-called wild horses, called Przewalski's horses. The researchers attempted to study the DNA of horse bones from sites belonging to the bow-tie culture, which were the aforementioned peoples who are believed to have domesticated horses thousands of years ago in Kazakhstan, or in what would become Kazakhstan. The researchers sequenced the data of 20 horses whose bones were recovered from various bow-tie archaeological sites. They also sequenced the DNA of other horses that lived across the world, all through the time period since horse domestication into the modern day. They compared this DNA to sequences from other horse species that had been gathered by other researchers doing other experiments in years past. This vast trove of genetic data allowed them to create a detailed tree of the horse family. To the researchers' surprise, they found that the domesticated bow-tie horses were the ancestors of the Przewalski's horses. So the last group of the so-called wild horses aren't actually wild horses at all. They're the feral descendants of domesticated bow-tie horses that escaped their human captors and tried to return to the wild. So this discovery was exciting enough on its own, but there's more. The researchers also found that none of the other horses that they studied were descended from these bow-tie horses, meaning that all of these other horses were stock from an older ancestor population. All of these other horses are all domesticated, leaving no population or subspecies of wild horses left on the planet. Because all of these horse species are domesticated, and the only so-called wild horses are actually the feral descendants of domesticated horses, this means that across the world, there are no more wild horses. There's none left. The researchers make two arguments to explain this. They argue that either the bow-tie herdsmen spreading into Europe and Asia interbred their horses with other wild species to the point that the bow-tie horse genes were diluted to something like 2.7% of the total ancestry of domesticated horses, and this would mask any potential relation. Or, they argue, the other argument is that the bow-tie horses didn't survive at all. They all died out, and other horse subspecies were domesticated separately, somewhere else in the world besides Kazakhstan. Either of these possibilities could explain why all of the DNA from domesticated horses that lived in the last 4,000 years only show a 2.7% bow-tie related ancestry. About this surprisingly low relatedness, the researchers say, and I quote, "This indicates that a massive genomic turnover underpins the expansion of the horse stock that gave rise to modern domesticates, which coincides with large-scale human population expansions during the early Bronze Age." Unquote. More data is needed, specifically more genetic data from these earlier horses, to determine the correct possibility, the correct argument, and thus to potentially clear away the fog of mystery that surrounds the origin of modern horses.